Okay, so I know this sounds ridiculous, but stay with me, because it's exactly the kind of dumb, awkward thing that somehow turned into one of the best nights of my life. Picture this. I'm standing in my tiny apartment bathroom, completely undressed, mid-dry off, when suddenly the towel I'm using gets yanked right out of my hands. Yeah, it was his towel, the guy the first was crushing on for weeks. And there I was, just standing there, caught, totally off guard. Let me back up a bit. My name's Alex, I'm 27, and I've been living in this cramped New York City studio for about a year now. It's not much, but it's mine. And more importantly, it's where I met Jake. Jake's my downstairs neighbor, the one with the ridiculously contagious laugh and this effortless way of making everyone feel like they've known him forever. He's the kind of guy who's into art and vintage records, with that messy brown hair that always looks like he just rolled out of bed, but somehow it's charming, not sloppy. We'd exchanged haze in the hallway for months. Sometimes I'd catch him reading a dog-eared book on the stoop outside, and I'd muster up the courage to ask what he was into. It was always something smart and funny. We clicked right away. Then last weekend, after a couple of drinks at a party nearby, Jake invited me over to watch some old movie classics. Because, apparently, he's got this insane collection of weird 80s sci-fi flicks. I couldn't say no, so there I was tonight, feeling kind of buzzed and relaxed, sitting on his couch, the movie humming in the background, when I realized I had forgotten my towel back at my place. Jake noticed and, without missing a beat, just said, "Use mine." And he tossed me this big, fluffy towel from his bathroom. Fast forward to me, back in his bathroom after the movie, trying to dry off after a quick shower because, well, I figured since I was there, why not freshen up? I grabbed the towel Jake had lent me and wrapped it around my waist. Then, right as I'm about to step out, the door creaks open and Jake walks in, fully dressed, with this half smirk that says he knows exactly what he's doing. Before I can say anything, he reaches over and pulls the towel away from me. I'm standing there, undressed as the day I was born, in someone else's bathroom, and he's holding my towel like it's some kind of prize. For a second, all I can do is stare at him, caught between embarrassment and this weird thrill I didn't expect. And that's how the night took a turn I never saw coming. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to figure out if I should panic, laugh, or just run for cover. Jake's eyes flicked down to where the towel had been wrapped, and then back up to mine, that teasing smirk still playing on his lips. "You really didn't think I'd just hand over my towel and let you keep it, did you?" he said, voice low enough to be almost a whisper, but loud enough that I felt it in my chest. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but my brain hit a wall. What do you say when the guy you've been crushing on casually steals your only form of modesty in his bathroom? Ugh, come on, man. I finally managed, trying to mask the blush creeping up my neck. "A little warning would have been nice." He chuckled, the sound warm and easy, like we'd known each other forever instead of just a couple hours. "Fair, but you looked way too comfortable in there." Then, surprisingly, he stepped forward and tossed the towel back to me, but with this look that said he wasn't done messing around. I grabbed it quickly, wrapped it back around my waist, and caught my breath. "So what now? You just keep me here, half undressed and vulnerable?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though my pulse was still racing. Jake shrugged, sitting down on the edge of the sink, hands clasped between his knees. "Depends. Are you going to tell me what you're thinking? Or just stand there all awkward and silent?" I laughed, the tension breaking a little. Well, I was definitely not expecting this level of towel drama tonight. But if you want the truth, I've been thinking you're way more charming than you let on. And maybe I'm a little relieved you didn't leave me standing there like a statue. He smiled, this genuine, slightly shy smile that made my stomach flip. "Good. Because I was hoping you'd stick around after the movie, and maybe after stealing my towel." That's when I realized how close he was. Closer than I'd ever been to anyone in a non-awkward way. I felt like I could reach out and touch the faint stubble on his jaw, or the way his eyes caught the light from the bathroom bulb. Instead, I just said, "You're really something, you know that?" He looked at me like I'd just handed him the keys to the city. "I could say the same about you. There was this electric pause, the kind where you both know something's about to shift, but neither wants to be the first to move. Finally, Jake stood up and leaned in just a bit, like he was testing the waters. "So, what do you say to a proper towel?" he joked, holding out another one from the rack. My heart skipped and I grabbed it without hesitation. "I'd say this one's got better luck than the first." We both laughed, and for a moment, the bathroom wasn't this awkward, cramped space anymore. It was just us, two guys feeling a connection that neither of us wanted to break. After I dried off, Jake gestured toward the living room. "Come on, I'll get us some coffee, and maybe we can pick up where we left off on that movie." I nodded, feeling lighter than I had all week. The night had started with a towel theft and a whole lot of embarrassment, but now, it seemed like something entirely different was waiting just around the corner. Something real. Something maybe worth sticking around for. As we walked back to the living room, I caught Jake's eye and realized I was already thinking about the next time I'd get to steal one of his towels. If only so, he'd have an excuse to pull it back. The living room was cozy, dimly lit by the soft glow of a single lamp and the flickering images on the TV. Jake disappeared into the tiny kitchen, and I took a moment to just look around. His place was an extension of him, warm, a little messy in the best way possible, with stacks of vinyl records leaning against the walls and posters of old movies plastered unevenly across the room. It felt inviting, like a place where stories had been told and shared, and maybe a few more were about to begin. Jake came back with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, handing me one with a grin that made my chest tighten. "So, Mr. Towel Thief, you surviving the great bathroom incident, okay?" he teased, settling onto the couch beside me. I took a sip, the bitterness of the coffee cutting through the slight buzz I still had from the drinks earlier. "Barely, but I have to admit, it's been one of the more memorable nights I've had in a while." He laughed, this warm, genuine sound that seemed to fill the room even more than the movie. "Good, because I have a feeling it's only getting started." We fell into an easy rhythm, talking about everything and nothing. Music, favorite movies, the weird quirks of living in the city. It was like we'd known each other for years, not just a handful of weeks exchanging polite greetings in the hallway. At some point, the movie faded into the background, and the conversation took on a more personal tone. Jake told me about his childhood, growing up near the coast, always feeling like the odd one out. I shared my own story, how moving to the city was supposed to be a fresh start, but loneliness had a way of sneaking in no matter where you went. He listened, really listened, and when I finished, he reached out, lightly brushing a stray hair from my forehead. The touch was gentle, deliberate, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Alex," he said softly, "I'm really glad you're here." "Me too," I whispered, feeling like I could say 1,000 things, but somehow this was enough. The night deepened, and with it, the space between us seemed to shrink until our shoulders touched, then our hands. I don't think either of us planned it, but it felt natural, like falling into a rhythm you didn't know your body had been waiting for. At one point, Jake looked at me with that same mischievous glint in his eye from earlier. "Remember the towel?" I smiled, feeling bold. "Yeah, I was thinking maybe there's a lesson in there somewhere." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What kind of lesson?" "That sometimes you have to let people in, even if it means risking a little embarrassment." His smile softened, and he leaned in closer, his breath warm against my cheek. I liked the sound of that. I closed the distance, and when our lips met, it was like everything that had been building between us finally found a way out. The kiss was slow, tentative at first, then deeper, more urgent. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was honest, full of all the things neither of us had said out loud, but both felt. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and grinning, Jake whispered, "So, about that towel. I think you owe me a rematch sometime." I laughed, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. "You're on." The rest of the night blurred into a happy kind of chaos, whispers, laughter, and the promise of whatever came next. And as I finally left his apartment, wrapped in a borrowed jacket but not a towel, I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes, the best connections start with the weirdest moments. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something worth holding on to. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of smile that feels like it's stitched into your face, the kind you can't wipe off, even if you wanted to. I kept replaying moments from the night before. Jake's smirk when he snatched the towel, the way his eyes softened when I shared parts of my story, that electric first kiss that somehow felt like coming home. I was still lying there, wrapped in my own blanket, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jake. Coffee and pancakes? My place in an hour. I didn't hesitate. Texting back, I told him I was in. By the time I got downstairs, I could already smell the faint scent of coffee and something sweet. Jake greeted me with that same easy grin, wearing one of his worn-in sweatshirts and a pair of pajama pants that looked ridiculously comfortable. The sight made me want to throw on my own sweats and just stay there all day. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, handing me a mug that was almost too hot to hold. I took a sip, savoring the bitterness mixed with just the right amount of cream. So, I began, settling onto his couch across from him. "How did you become a pancake expert?" He laughed, the sound filling the room like it had the night before. "It's a family secret, but I'm willing to share if you stick around." I raised an eyebrow, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Careful, Jake. You're making it hard to leave," he shrugged, pretending to be casual but clearly pleased. "Good, because I wasn't planning on letting you go anytime soon." For the next couple of hours, we cooked, talked, and laughed about everything, from terrible date stories to our favorite bands. There was an easy rhythm between us, like we'd been syncing up for years, not just a few days. At one point, I caught him staring at me from across the kitchen island. When I met his eyes, he blinked and smiled sheepishly. "What?" I asked, teasing. "Nothing," he said. I'm really glad you're here." I felt the same way. "Me too." Later, when I stood up to grab another pancake, Jake reached out and pulled me back down by the hand, sitting me on the counter beside him. His fingers intertwined with mine, and I could feel this quiet electricity pulsing between us. "Alex," he said softly, "I don't want this to be just a one-night thing." I looked at him, heart pounding. "Neither do I." We spent the rest of the morning wrapped up in that feeling, the one where everything is new but somehow just right. I realized then that Jake wasn't just a neighbor or a crush. He was becoming someone I wanted to build something with. When I finally left his apartment that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in ages. The city streets buzzed around me, but I carried a little bubble of calm, a secret warmth that reminded me how unexpectedly beautiful life could be when you let yourself take a chance. And maybe, just maybe, it all started because of a towel. Over the next few days, things between Jake and me settled into this comfortable, almost effortless groove. We texted constantly, sometimes just silly memes or song recommendations, other times random thoughts that only made sense between us. I found myself looking forward to every ping from him, the way his messages made my chest feel lighter, like a secret happiness I wasn't ready to share with anyone else yet. One evening, a few days after that pancake morning, Jake knocked on my door just as I was about to start dinner. I opened it to find him standing there with a bag of groceries and that same easy grin. "Decided we should cook together," he said. I laughed, stepping aside to let him in. "You mean I'm not eating alone tonight?" "Not on my watch," he replied, tossing me a head of garlic like it was a peace offering. Cooking with Jake was unexpectedly fun. He had this way of turning even the simplest task into a game, making me laugh when I almost set the oven mitt on fire or flubbed a recipe. The kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and spices, and as we cooked side by side, I caught myself stealing glances at him, noticing things I hadn't before. The way he scrunched his nose when he concentrated, or the dimples that appeared whenever he smiled. When we finally sat down to eat, the conversation shifted into more personal territory. Jake talked about his art projects, the struggles and the small victories. I shared a little about work, about the parts that drained me and the moments that made it worth it. "I'm glad you're sharing this stuff with me," Jake said quietly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Me too," I whispered back, feeling the warmth spread through my chest again. After dinner, we moved to the couch, the city lights casting a soft glow through the window. Jake put on some music, something mellow and acoustic, and before I realized it, he was leaning into me, his head resting lightly on my shoulder. I didn't move. Part of me wanted to, sure. Wants and nerves are always there, but mostly, I just wanted to stay exactly where I was. Alex, Jake murmured, I've been thinking about how crazy it is that all of this started because of a towel. I smiled, feeling a bit lightheaded. Yeah, who knew a towel could be such an important plot point? He chuckled softly, then looked up at me. I'm serious, though. I'm really glad you were brave enough to come over that night. To stick around. Honestly? I said, my voice a little shaky. I was terrified. But not because of you. Because I wasn't sure if I'd ever find someone who could make me feel this safe. Jake's eyes softened, and he brushed a thumb over my cheek. You're safe with me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and full of promise. I turned to face him, heart pounding, and leaned in slowly. Our lips met again, this time with a quiet confidence, like we both knew this was where we were supposed to be. The night stretched on, filled with whispered conversations and soft touches. It wasn't rushed or frantic. It was steady and sure, like building something real brick by brick. When I finally walked back to my apartment later, the city seemed different, brighter somehow. I wasn't just another face in the crowd anymore. I was someone Jake cared about, someone worth the risk. And as I crawled into bed, the memories of that stolen towel and our shared moments wrapped around me like a warm blanket, reminding me that sometimes the weirdest beginnings lead to the most beautiful stories. Over the next couple of weeks, Jake and I started to really weave into each other's lives in ways that felt both exciting and, honestly, kind of terrifying. It's funny how something as silly as a stolen towel can lead to someone becoming a significant part of your everyday. But there we were, texting first thing in the morning, sharing playlists, even making plans for weekend brunches. One Friday night, I found myself knocking on Jake's door, a little nervous, but mostly just eager. He opened up immediately, wearing his signature lazy grin and that worn-out flannel shirt I secretly loved. Hey, you, he said, stepping aside to let me in. Hey, I replied, stepping into his apartment, already feeling that familiar, cozy vibe wrap around me like a warm hug. Jake was fiddling with a small stack of canvases set up in the corner. Working on a new piece, he said, eyes gleaming. Thought maybe you'd want to see it. I nodded, curious. He led me over, and I took in the painting, a riot of colors, abstract but somehow capturing this raw, emotional energy. It's incredible, I said honestly. You really have a gift. He shrugged, cheeks coloring just a bit. Thanks, it means a lot coming from you. We settled on the couch, and the conversation drifted naturally from art to music to the weird little quirks we both had. I told him about how I always needed a specific playlist to focus at work, and he confessed he had a habit of talking to his plants like they were people. At some point, Jake reached out and tangled his fingers with mine, and I felt this surge of warmth that made my stomach flip. I've been thinking, he said quietly, about how fast this has all moved. Me too, I admitted, but it feels right, doesn't it? He smiled, that slow, genuine smile that made my heart race. Yeah, I don't want to mess this up. Neither do I said, squeezing his hand gently. Later that evening, while the city lights twinkled outside his window, we found ourselves curled up together, the kind of close where you can feel each other's breath, hear the steady beat of a heart that suddenly feels like home. The next morning, I woke up to the scent of coffee and something sweet. Jake was already in the kitchen, humming softly as he flipped pancakes. I couldn't help but grin. You're relentless with those pancakes, huh? He shot me a playful look. Only the best for you. I sat at the small kitchen table, sipping coffee, watching him move around the space with this ease that made me feel lucky just to be there. After breakfast, we spent the day wandering through the city, discovering little bookstores and hidden coffee shops neither of us had been to before. It was one of those perfect days where time seems to stretch out and nothing else exists except the two of us and the world we were creating together. That night, back at his place, Jake pulled me close and whispered, "I'm falling for you, Alex." My heart leapt, and I smiled, feeling tears prick at the edges of my eyes. "I'm falling for you too." It wasn't dramatic or rushed. Just two people being honest about something real and beautiful. As the days turned into weeks, we kept building on that foundation. Late night talks, spontaneous adventures, quiet moments that spoke louder than words. I never expected a stolen towel to lead me here, but now I wouldn't trade this for anything. Sometimes, life's strangest little moments are just the beginning of something incredible. And with Jake, I was ready to see where this journey would take us. A few weeks into whatever this was between Jake and me, I realized something. I was starting to forget what it was like not to have him around. I mean, it was subtle at first. The way I'd catch myself texting him little updates throughout the day, or how I'd pause mid-thought, wondering what he'd say if I shared this random thing with him. But then there were these moments that hit me harder, like when I'd open my fridge expecting to see my own half-empty carton of milk, and instead, there'd be a little jar of homemade jam with a note in his handwriting. For you. Because you like the sweet stuff. It was small, but it felt huge. One Friday night, Jake invited me over to cook dinner. I say cook, but honestly, he was the one doing the heavy lifting, while I hovered in the kitchen like an awkward assistant, chopping onions and trying not to make things worse. The place smelled incredible: roasted garlic, fresh herbs, and something else I couldn't quite place, but liked a lot. As we moved around the kitchen, our hands accidentally brushed a few times, and each time I felt this spark. I wasn't sure if it was the wine we'd opened, or just the way things were slowly unraveling between us, but I knew I wanted to lean into it. After dinner, we settled on the couch, the city lights filtering in through the window behind us. Jake pulled me close, his arm draped around my shoulders, and I rested my head against his chest. You know, he murmured, I was thinking about that night when I took back my towel. I laughed softly, looking up at him. Yeah? Honestly, I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I wanted to see you, you know? Like, really see you. My heart did that ridiculous thing, where it skips a beat and then races all at once. You did. And it kind of worked. He smiled, that slow, easy smile of his. Good. Because I'm not done seeing you yet. The way he said it felt like a promise. In the following days, we started carving out more time for each other. Sometimes it was lazy afternoons watching movies we both liked. Other times it was late-night conversations that stretched into the early hours. We shared playlists, favorite books, and even silly little secrets. The kind that make you feel like you're building something that's yours alone. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I found myself crashing at Jake's place. We ordered takeout and lounged around in sweatpants. The kind of easy, comfortable day that makes you realize how much you want someone in your life, even in the mundane moments. As the night wore on, Jake reached for my hand and held it, fingers intertwining with mine. Alex, he said softly, I know it's only been a little while, but I feel like I've known you forever. I squeezed his hand back, my voice barely above a whisper. I feel the same. That night, as I lay there next to him, I thought about how far we'd come. From a stolen towel to this quiet, steady connection that felt so much more than I ever expected. The city outside kept moving. Fast, loud, unpredictable. But in Jake's arms, I found something steady. Something real. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to see where this could go. It was a Saturday morning when I realized things were starting to get seriously real between Jake and me. The kind of weekend where you don't have any plans except to just be. No pressure, no expectations, just two people figuring out what it means to share their time. Jake was already up when I stumbled into his apartment, bleary-eyed and clutching a mug of coffee like it was a lifeline. He was at the window, sunlight casting a golden glow across his face, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching him. There was a calmness about him that I hadn't noticed before, like he belonged in this space, and maybe, just maybe, so did I. Well, good morning, sleepyhead, he said without turning around, voice low and soft. I shuffled over and perched on the arm of the couch, taking a sip from my mug. Morning, you're up early. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. Then he turned to face me, eyes warm and clear. You? Not much better, I confessed, feeling suddenly vulnerable. Guess we're just bad at mornings. Jake laughed, that quiet, genuine laugh that made me want to memorize every inflection. Maybe, or maybe we just need more of these lazy mornings. He reached out, brushing his fingers over the back of my hand, and I felt something shift. A little tremor of hope, maybe, or the weight of all the moments we'd already shared stacking up into something bigger. We spent the day in that easy rhythm, making breakfast together. Jake insisted on pancakes again, and I wasn't about to argue, bickering over which movie to watch, and sprawling out on the couch tangled up in blankets and each other. I was starting to understand what people meant when they talked about comfort, that feeling of being known without needing to say a word. Later, as the evening settled in, Jake pulled me close on the couch, resting his head on my shoulder. "Alex," he said quietly, "can I tell you something?" "Always," I replied, heart already speeding up. He hesitated for just a second, then looked up at me with those eyes that always seemed to see right through the walls I'd built. "I'm scared," I blinked, surprised by the honesty. "Scared? Of what? Of messing this up? Of losing whatever this is between us?" His voice cracked just a little, and I felt a rush of protectiveness. "Jake," I said, lifting his chin gently so he'd look at me. "We're both figuring this out. Nobody gets it perfect. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He smiled then, a little more relaxed, and I leaned in, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Me neither. I want to see where this goes, with you." We sat there, wrapped up in each other and the quiet hum of the city outside, and I realized that maybe love wasn't about having all the answers. Maybe it was about being brave enough to try, even when you're scared. That night, as I fell asleep beside Jake, I felt like I'd finally found a place where I could be myself. Awkward moments, stolen towels, and all. And somehow, that felt like the most extraordinary thing in the world. A few months later, I found myself back in Jake's bathroom, the scene of the great towel heist. But this time, I was standing there fully clothed, holding one of his towels as he stepped out of the shower. He caught my eye and rolled his towel toward me like a peace offering, that familiar, playful smirk on his face. "Truce?" he asked. I grinned, taking the towel. "Truce." It was a small moment, sure, but it felt like one of those quiet milestones that marked the shift from something tentative to something steady and real. Over the time we'd spent together, the awkwardness had melted away into comfort, the nervous excitement into easy companionship. We'd learned how to be there for each other through the little things, the late-night talks, the mismatched playlists, the way he always remembered exactly how I liked my coffee. And the big things, too. The fears, the hopes, the slow unraveling of walls we'd kept up for so long. Looking back, it's funny how that ridiculous towel moment became the spark for all of it. There'd been embarrassment, vulnerability, and a whole lot of laughter. But underneath it all was this feeling I hadn't quite dared to name at first. Trust. And that, I realized, was the foundation of everything that followed. One night, sitting on his couch with our legs tangled up, and the city lights shimmering through the window, Jake reached out and took my hand. "Alex," he said softly, "thank you for being brave, for sticking around, for all of this." I squeezed his hand back, feeling a warmth that went beyond words. "Thank you for stealing my towel and not letting go." We laughed, and then, without needing anything else, we just sat there. Two people, imperfect but willing to try, finding something real in the messiness of life. It wasn't a fairy tale or a perfect romance. It was something better, something honest and grounded, and ours. And sometimes, that's all you need.